The wind howled across the dry plains of Arizona as dusk settled over the small frontier town of Red Hollow. The horizon was painted in fire and gold, dust clouds swirling like restless spirits around the wagons parked in the square. The townsfolk gathered, faces lit with the orange glow of torches, voices low but eager. They had caught an Apache, a warrior, a raider, a man they called Savage. Bound tight to a wagon wheel with coarse rope cutting into his bronze skin, he stood tall even in his capture, his black hair matted with sweat and blood, eyes burning with silent defiance. His name was Catan, though none of them cared to know it. To them, he was only an enemy, a symbol of fear and vengeance for the raids that had haunted the outskirts of town. Sheriff Harlan Pike stood before the crowd, a tall man with a silver badge and a face carved from stone. "At dawn," he said coldly, "justice will be done. The Apache will hang for what he's done to our people." The crowd murmured its approval, but not everyone joined in the hateful chorus. Near the back of the crowd stood a small figure, barely 10 years old, a girl with tangled blonde curls and eyes wide with both fear and pity. Her name was Ellie. She clutched a small rag doll to her chest as she watched the scene unfold, her little heart pounding at the sight of the bound man beneath the stars. Ellie had heard the stories. Her father, one of the settlers, had been lost in a skirmish months ago. Everyone said the Apaches were monsters. But as she looked at Catan, his back straight despite his pain, his gaze steady though the crowd jeered, something deep within her stirred. He didn't look like a monster. He looked human, proud, and more than anything, wronged. She saw it in the way he looked at the sheriff, in the way he refused to bow. He was not begging. He was waiting. As night fell and the crowd dispersed, leaving the Apache to the mercy of the desert cold, Ellie lingered near the edge of the square. Her mother called her home twice, but she didn't move. The torches sputtered out one by one, and only the soft rustle of wind through dry grass filled the silence. Catan remained awake, his breathing shallow. The stars shimmered above him. Ancestors, he thought, and he wondered if he would see the dawn. Ellie crept closer, her tiny boots crunching softly against the dirt. Her doll hung from her arm, forgotten now. She stopped just a few feet from him. "Mr. she whispered, her voice trembling. Catan's eyes shifted toward her, dark and unreadable. "Do you hurt?" she asked. He didn't answer, but something in his expression softened. She took a hesitant step closer. "They say you killed people." "Did you?" Catan's throat was dry, his lips cracked, but he spoke in a low rasp. "I defended mine," he said simply. Ellie frowned, confused. "Defended?" she repeated. He nodded, eyes glinting in the starlight. "My people, my family, like you would defend yours." The words struck her small heart like a thunderclap. For the first time, she felt the cracks in everything she'd been told. Hours passed. The night grew colder. Ellie returned home only to sneak out again with a piece of bread and a flask of water she'd stolen from the kitchen. She tiptoed across the sleeping town, her little hands trembling as she poured water to Catan's lips. He hesitated, then drank slowly, eyes never leaving hers. "Why?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "Because you looked thirsty." That was how it began, the bond between a condemned Apache warrior and a little frontier girl who refused to believe hate was the only truth. Each hour before dawn, she snuck back to the square, bringing him scraps of food and whispers of comfort. She asked him about his people, and though his answers were short, she saw something in his eyes that she couldn't name, something deep, ancient, and wounded. But dawn was coming fast. Sheriff Pike had already planned the hanging. The rope was ready, the gallows set near the well. Ellie overheard the men talking in the saloon, boasting about how the Apache would swing clean by morning. She ran home, heart racing, mind spinning. Something inside her screamed that it wasn't right, that this man, this Catan, didn't deserve to die like that. And so, in the dark before the dawn, she made a decision that no one would have believed possible for a child. She ran. She grabbed a rusty knife from her father's old tool chest, wrapped herself in her mother's shawl, and crept out once more into the biting cold. Her small frame disappeared into the fog as the first gray light of dawn touched the hills. The square was empty save for Catan, still bound, barely conscious. His lips were blue now, his hands swollen from the ropes. Ellie's tears came freely as she reached him. "Hold still," she whispered, sawing at the ropes with trembling hands. The knife slipped, cutting her palm, but she didn't stop. Caton stirred weakly. "You must go," he rasped. "They will kill you." She shook her head fiercely. "I won't let them hurt you." The final rope snapped and he slumped forward, barely able to stand. She slipped under his arm, her tiny shoulders straining to bear his weight. Somehow, inch by inch, they made it past the edge of town. But dawn broke fast, and with it, shouts rang out behind them. "The Apache's gone!" Someone cut him loose. Ellie turned to see torches flaring, horses whinnying, and the sheriff's voice booming with fury. "Find them both." The chase began. Ellie led Caton toward the river, her small feet slipping on the dew-slick grass. He stumbled, groaning, but she urged him on. "This way," she cried, pointing toward the narrow canyon where the rocks turned red as blood in the sunlight. Arrows of sunlight cut through the fog as the riders thundered closer. Caton, regaining a flicker of strength, looked down at the little girl who had risked everything for him. Her hair was wild, her cheeks streaked with tears, yet her eyes burned with courage. He had seen warriors fall with less resolve. For a moment, something inside him broke open. A flood of emotion he had buried since the war took his kin. He would not let her die for him. He took her hand and led her into the canyon, his movements quickening despite the pain. Behind them, gunfire cracked through the air. A bullet tore into the rock beside them. Ellie screamed, ducking. "Don't look back," he growled, pulling her behind a boulder. They hid there, breathless, as the riders' voices echoed through the ravine. Hours passed before silence fell again. Caton finally turned to her, his face pale but calm. "You saved me," he said quietly. Ellie looked down. "I didn't want you to die." He reached out, gently touching the cut on her palm. "You are brave, like the sun that rises even after the darkest night." From that day on, legends would whisper through Red Hollow about the night a little girl defied her own people to save an Apache warrior. The sheriff searched for weeks but never found them. Some said Caton carried her to safety and left her near a passing wagon before disappearing into the mountains. Others said they both vanished into the desert, protected by the spirits of the land. But what was certain was this: the bond they formed in that single night changed the hearts of many. Years later, when Ellie grew into a young woman, she would return to the edge of the canyon and leave flowers by a wagon wheel half buried in the sand. And as the wind whispered through the sagebrush, she would swear she heard a familiar voice say, "The sun rises, little one," and she would smile, knowing somewhere beyond the horizon, the man she once saved had found his freedom.